Welcome to this month's edition of Designed for Organization. My name is Tia Hunsperger, and I am a senior designer at Closet Factory here in Colorado. I am going to be joined here in a minute by Keli with Organized by Keli, and we're going to be talking today about something you might not expect an organizer to talk about. We're going to be talking about collections, how to organize them, how to manage them, and how to display them. I know oftentimes we think an organizer is going to tell us to get rid of all of our stuff and become a minimalist. And I know Keli really advertises that in her marketing pieces, that you don't have to become a minimalist to be organized. So she's going to come on here in a minute, and we are going to talk all about collections and how to keep them organized.
Hey.
Hi, welcome. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. I'm enjoying this sunny, warm Colorado weather that we're having. What about you?
Same. We had a water main break.
Oh.
And I'm anticipating our water being shut off, so I've been running around watering everything, starting the dishwasher, all that good stuff. But the kids are having a blast. They're all riding bikes through the water. It's a party out there. So hey, it's one of those life gives you lemons, make lemonade, I guess.
Yes.
Enjoy the kids running through it. So
for sure. So Keli, let's talk about collections. I know one of the things that I often see in your social media posts is that you're not going to require us to become a minimalist when we work with you. Is that correct?
Oh, 100%. I love this topic so much because I love to collect things, as you can see. And I think that a lot of times, because of different shows that are out, different just sound bites that people have taken, that it's become this idea that an organizer is going to come in and make you get rid of everything, and you have to be a minimalist, and you can't collect things, and there's shame in collections, and just all these emotions and pieces that get wrapped up in there. And that's a huge piece for us, is we just want to help you create the life you want.
Right.
And if you want lots of collections, great. Let's figure out how to display them and organize them. So, and there's lots of nuances to those pieces. So I just love this topic with you.
Yeah, for sure. So I go into all different types of homes, all different types of people. And I have to say, when I go into someone's home and I see a well appreciated, well displayed collection of something, I find it really heartwarming. And oftentimes there's a story about what inspired the collection, and maybe it's things that someone has collected, through a lifetime or through travels and that sort of thing. So I love to hear the stories and, the personal love that people have for the things in their collection. So let's start, Keli, with like, what do you categorize as a collection? Like, when is it a collection and when is it just a bunch of stuff? Like, what's
the difference? I'm going to go ahead and use the bad word here, which is hoarding tendencies. People get really worried when we look at collections, and that's the first thing that'll come to a lot of people's mind. So first of all, I'll say everyone collects something, whether they do it cognizantly or not. Everyone collects something.
Okay.
And so what's the difference? Well, when you have a collection, you can sort it, you can organize it, and you can display it, which means you can find it, you can enjoy it, you can appreciate it. When it crosses the line and becomes what we're familiar with, hoarding tendencies, etc., is when there's no longer a capacity to sort and categorize, and there's not a way to display it. Maybe there's no boundary on it.
Okay.
And there's no way to find what you need inside of it. But the biggest thing that sets the two apart is it taking away the ability to use the space for the reason it exists? Is it in the way of daily life? So, you can have a not yet organized collection, and that is very different than this other hoarding tendency, just too much stuff kind of thing. And so if it is bringing joy to your life and it's not impeding your daily life, it's probably a collection. The question is it organized yet or not? So that's the way I kind of differentiate the two.
I love that. I love that. So tell me a little bit about when you walk into someone's home and you meet them and you maybe are challenged with a collection, kind of what are the steps you go through with that person to figure out how to manage it, where it goes, how they display it? Can you walk us through those steps?
Sure. I think the first thing is always to determine, like, do they still love it? I have these art supplies in my current collection, but I'm an old scrapbooker, and I had every tool and supply known to man for scrapbooking. And I lugged them all around and moved and organized them several times. But there came a point when I realized, I think that Instagram and some of these other things have forever taken the place of the traditional scrapbook.
Yeah.
And I'm never going to sit down and create that scrapbook. So at that point, those items for me became clutter because they don't serve a purpose and they don't bring me joy. They bring me guilt for the scrapbooks I didn't make, So
for sure.
So those have to go. So with anyone, you're looking at determining, okay, is it still relevant? Do you still love all the pieces, or is it part of this collection that's still relevant and you still love it? Is it your mother's collection that was passed down, So we have to just determine, like, the emotions that go with that collection to see, is it something that is bringing joy or it's saved for sentimental purposes? Because you're going to go about the solutions very differently.
For sure. And I think when it's a passed down collection, I think sometimes we're like, oh, I'm so honored that I was the person in the family that received this. And other times it's like, nobody else would take it, so I didn't want to get rid of it, so I took it, right? Like,
right.
There's different emotions behind that. I got to work with a client a couple of years ago who, when his father passed away, he left him a large collection of records, DVDs, Blu-rays, just a whole different, lots of media. And we just created some really beautiful, a big set of shelves off of his kind of living dining room area, where he then had, it was all just stored in boxes at that point, and he wanted to be able to access these items and really be able to get to them and utilize them and enjoy them. So we created a nice big set of shelves that he could then, adjust for the size of the media that he wanted to put on those shelves.
I love that, because since it did still bring him joy, like, it was a collection that didn't become a burden.
Yes.
It's something that, brought probably good memories for him and was an honor to be able to display it and build the shelving and really honor it in a great way. Sometimes you'll see china and other things that are collections, and, maybe the child that's inheriting them doesn't have the same affinity for them. And one thing we can do in that case is save one piece and display it, and then do something meaningful where it might be appreciated somewhere else for the rest, So, or any other, array of options. But when they do love it, I love that you were able to, okay, how are we going to organize and display this thing?
Yeah, and he was very fond of his collection, was willing to invest in finding a good home for these pieces. What's your thought on displaying collections, Kelly? Is it important to have them all out? Is it sometimes a recommendation to maybe have your favorite pieces of the collection out? What's your thought on that?
That's a good question, because it's everything always depends, right?
Right.
We just finished up in a house Well, we're still finishing up in a house where the husband is the collector.
Okay.
And he collects shoes,
Okay.
sunglasses, backpacks, t-shirts, bacon memorabilia, like all different types of things. And, you know, in finishing up these collections, like he really wanted his things in his space. And his wife she's not a big collector, so she was like, oh, it's fine, you know, we can have this here, this over here, you know, kind of where the space allowed a little more.
Okay.
And I could see that for him, there's great joy in being surrounded by these collections and having all of his things in one place so he can see the whole collection of sunglasses or jerseys or whatever it might be. And so your strategy is going to be different depending on the person. For him, we're looking for ways to display it where it's all together in one place.
Okay.
Because sometimes with a collection, it's the quantity that makes the statement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And other times not so much, you know. So really, it's always customized. There's not a one way to do it, but it's tricky sometimes to display these larger collections because maybe it's 100 pairs of sunglasses. Well, if you have 6 or 12 pairs, we can get a cute little thing of stackers from Container Store, and we can.
I can create a drawer for those containers to go into, or an organizer for them to sit down. 100 takes up a lot of drawers.
Right. So you're into a new category, right? And I know you have like the inserts for the drawers that have all the spots for something, you know, that works amazing for smaller collections of things.
Yes.
But when it gets larger, when it gets to be like my colors back here, sometimes it doesn't fit a drawer or a bin or a container. And so getting really creative with the way to display it, I think, is really important. And looking at, depending on what it is, determining the humidity, the temperature, the light. Like, I have to be careful that my supplies don't get too hot.
Correct.
They don't get too much sunlight, different things. So placement comes before the display piece, just in determining, is it wine? Like, you're going to display wine very differently than you are a bunch of sunglasses or something, right?
And I think the heat and the humidity, that's an important piece of how you might display some things. I also think too, like, who has access to these things, right? Because I have a client that we've been talking about how to display some things on a shelf, and she's worried about her cat jumping up on the shelf and knocking something valuable off, but she doesn't necessarily want to put everything behind a door. So that's a whole other piece of, like, does someone in the family get to it? Does the pet knock them down? Whatever it might be, do we need some protection from that? And then also from a dust standpoint, right? Like, there's all dust and pollen that, you know, linger around our homes, especially this time of year. Is it something that needs a protective covering from a cleanliness standpoint as well?
Right. And I think the other thing that comes into play when looking at, like, okay, Tia, I'm going to have you come out and I'm going to have you custom build a space for my art supplies.
Yeah.
Right? Giving yourself a boundary and determining, with this collection, do I want some room to grow? Do I need some open slots? Or is it done? And if I do want to let it grow, how much am I willing to let it grow? Because this display, the container, the shelving, whatever we do, it needs to have some type of boundary, so that I think for our minds, it sets a trigger of, you have to go back and evaluate. You got to go back and look at what's there. Do you still love it, use it, need it, want it? Or maybe it's time to shift and let go of a little so other things can fit in the space. Or you call Tia back and say, I need to add another set but then you're still being cognizant of it. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, my collection has grown. I still totally love it. I want to build out another space to keep it going. But some type of boundary and triggers inside of that collection so that it is still enjoyable and something you love. I was thinking about this just today. I like to collect colors, as you can see.
Yeah.
So this is not a plug for makeup, I promise, but I'm totally obsessed with this Saint makeup. And it's these little magnetic things that stick in here.
Okay.
But I have the largest single compact thing that they make. And as you can see, it is now full.
Yes. You hit your limit.
Say again?
You've hit your limit. You found the boundary, right?
I have hit my boundary. And there's something for me as a person who loves to collect that's satisfying about having all the holes filled.
Yes, yes.
But it's also put me at a spot where I'm like, okay, if I decide I want more, what am I going to do with something I already have? Because I'm not going to add another set, you know? I need to use them up and then get more. It's just that boundary. And I think it's really important to have one, because if not, I can go watch more Instagram videos and order 10 more colors that are floating. And at that point, the collection's not fun anymore.
Right.
And so just figuring out how these shelving things or whatever's built, whatever's put in place, can it be a boundary, and is it a fair boundary? I started with 4 slots.
Okay.
Well, obviously that wasn't enough, right? But now this is more than enough. So just really figuring out what makes the most sense for your lifestyle and what you like. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, I think about, you know, as we're talking through this, I think some things that we collect are simply purely a collection. Your client who has a sunglass collection, you know, it's a tool that most of us have in our life to have a few pairs of sunglasses, maybe a dressy pair and a sports pair and that sort of thing. But at some point, this thing that is a tool, then we become fond of, and it becomes a collection, maybe like your eyeshadow, right? And I think, you know, I mean, obviously a lot of the work that I do is in people's closets with their wardrobe. And I think, you know, what starts out as a necessity that we have some clothes to wear on our daily activities, for some people becomes a collection where they enjoy, you know, gathering more things. And obviously there's, you know, a lot of different reasons why some of us have less and some of us have more. But I think if we think about it that way, a collection oftentimes starts as something that is a necessity. And then as we love it, it begins to grow as something more that then becomes a collection.
I agree, and that's kind of going back to that idea of, you know, the collection you're aware that you're creating, and you're hunting the next piece and whatever. But then there are these collections that people aren't aware of, and I think about this a lot, because in the process we use, we come in, we take everything out, we sort it, and we categorize it. Well, inevitably, collections surface in that process. And someone will walk in and say, oh my gosh, I had no idea that I have 15 pairs of black flats or whatever. Well, that's now a collection, but it wasn't one that they were aware they were creating. And I wonder, like, you know, we talk a lot about abundance and scarcity lately. And I think sometimes out of scarcity, we end up collecting things we don't even realize we're collecting. And that's a totally different situation than this abundance mindset of collecting, where you're aware of the fact that you're doing it. And so I almost feel like these need 2 different names of collection.
Right, right.
Because if you are collecting chapstick, that's one we find all the time. And we're in Colorado, right? It's dry.
Yeah.
And you need one at your fingertips regularly.
In each way, yes.
Yes. But we'll find large collections of chapstick, and just think of all the money spent.
Yes.
That maybe didn't necessarily need to be spent, and it's not a value add. It's not bringing, that collection of chapstick is not bringing anyone joy.
Right.
So weighing that out to really evaluate and say, am I cognizantly collecting this? Am I aware of the fact, and is it fun and brings joy? Or is it a side effect of something else, and looking at what that means? So.
Yeah, for sure, because I mean, joy, there's that whole, like, does this spark joy? But does a collection feel burdensome, or are we excited about it, right? Like, when you currently, the art supplies that you have behind you, you would be so excited to sit down and create something with those. But I think when, you talk about your scrapbooking from previous time, you might have sat down at the table with those items, and it might have felt cumbersome because you weren't as actively involved in that activity before. And I think there's something that happens. Sometimes we build inadvertent collections when we're on the hunt for a certain thing. We're on the hunt for, maybe it's the perfect pair of black flats. And so we get a pretty good pair, and then we find a little bit better pair, and then we find a pair that was on sale, and so we gather these things as we go on the hunt for the perfect one. Maybe we never find the perfect one, maybe we do, but it's all about working towards, that one ideal thing, or a couple ideal things, and then we end up collecting the imperfect options along the way, because they're kind of the best things that we can find. And I think that happens, I talk about that related to shoes, but I think that happens even, sometimes my husband is looking for a certain type of tool, and he'll get a next best option while he's looking for the perfect one. And then he ends up with a number of these things because he's trying to find the just right option. And then once we have them, then do we always step back and say, I don't need all of these screwdrivers or wrenches or whatever it is? And I think that's the piece that doesn't always happen until we call someone like you and your team in to review those items.
It's so true. And then, like, I just this weekend decluttered my bathroom, because we all have to do it. It's not a one and done thing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And you're right. It's that search for the perfect. For me, it's lotion. Like, okay. And so I was like, oh my gosh, how have I ended up with so many kinds of, well, my dermatologist recommended this kind, and the esthetician recommended this kind. I found this, and it just became this inadvertent collection. And then you look at it and, like, you spent money on it. Like, I get it, So do you use it up? Is it a consumable you can just get through quickly and let it go that way? Or do you just toss it? Like, you get in those weird spaces. And one thing I like to always ask in that space is, what has more value? The real estate or the lotion right now?
Right.
And if keeping the lotion is going to slow down my day or add clutter to the space, probably the real estate has more value.
Right.
But if it's not in the way and it's not impeding anything, probably the lotion has more value. But just weighing it out to figure out which one makes the most sense at the time.
Yeah, and I think that for me that comes into play a lot in like the kitchen organization space, right? Because if we have a pantry, I was designing a pantry for a client this week who's going to be able to overflow a lot of kitchen items into the pantry. But if we don't have that extra space in the pantry, it's like deciding what that prime real estate space is versus the things that we hold on to. Because one time we needed a bundt cake pan because we made a bundt cake. But do we really need the bundt cake pan? I don't know. It's those kind of things of, like, if we have a big pantry like my client did, then we can put it on the shelves at the top of the ceiling and get to it, once a year when we make our, grandma's special bundt cake recipe or whatever it might be.
Right. And that's one thing I love too, the idea of, before you buy the bundt cake pan or whatever it is, determine where are you going to store it.
Yeah.
And that has saved me so much money because even my friends, my husband, they all laugh. I'll be like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. I love that. And they're like, yeah, but you don't want to store it, do you? And I'm like, no, I don't want one because I don't want to store it. But weighing it out, it's that real estate. Which one has more value? And you're right. If you have a great pantry with all the space, add the bundt cake pan.
Yes.
I have a bundt cake pan and I only use it on Christmas morning to make monkey bread. So I store it in my Christmas.
Okay.
And that way it reminds me, oh yeah, monkey bread. And
perfect.
I don't have it in my way. It's not taking up valuable real estate. It's in my storage shed. So looking for ways to put those things so that they're in the right place and they don't take up that space.
What zone is that? Is that zone 4?
3.
There's only 3.
Yeah, but mostly there's 3. So like when you're talking about the top of the pantry for that client, that's probably 2.
Okay.
And then further away. There's no hard rule for it, but it's going to depend on the activity in each space for what becomes 1, 2, and 3. But yeah, 3 is usually that garage, storage shed, whatever, once a year type use.
The things you know exactly when you need them. It's not just a random occasional thing you're gonna pull out for.
Right. For
sure.
Sure.
I love that story of your bundt pan and the monkey bread. That's great. I would have never seen. That's the great thing about the way we get to chat about these things. I would have never thought to put a cake pan. I would have put the cake pan with the cake pans because that seems logical to me. But you've recategorized it as a Christmas item, even though it's technically a cake pan, and you store it with your Christmas items, which I love, and I think that's awesome. But I wouldn't have necessarily thought of that way of thinking. My husband and I have those conversations all the time where we think about things. I don't know if I've ever told you this story, Kelly, but we were helping some friends prepare for a wedding one time, and my husband was loading this wagon that the ring bearer was going to get pulled down the aisle in, and he was tying it to the top of our car because the handle was too tall. And I was like, why don't you just lay it on its side? And he would have never thought to lay it on its side and wedge it between the back seats, but it totally worked. His thought process. And so we use that analogy with each other. He's like, what would you do with the wagon in this situation?
I love that. Yeah, collaboration. Like we need to look at it different ways. And one thing I'll throw out there for you for categorizing.
Yes.
I see this all the time because people get stuck. Like it's this, it's that, it's this, it's that. Think about the action. Like, what are you going to do with that item?
Okay.
That bundt pan, the action is monkey bread on Christmas morning. So that helps me determine, oh, it can go with Christmas.
With Christmas. I love that. I love it. I mean, I think it's perfect. It's just not the way I would have necessarily thought about it. So I'll do a little this week, a little walking around the house and thinking, how do I use this? And is it in the place where I use it versus the place that it seems like it should go for some
Right.
Well, Kelly, before we wrap up today, any last thoughts on, storing and displaying collections? Obviously, I can come in if someone has a space, I can come in and build a beautiful set of shelves, a beautiful cabinet to store those collections. But any thoughts that you have on kind of how to store and what to display, what's important when we're making those decisions?
I think just my biggest thing would be there's no shame in collecting things. And to just remember that everyone collects something, even if it's ideas and information, even if it's not tangible. It's everyone, I think, collects something. Some more than others, sure.
Yeah.
But whether it's ideas and information that you collect or art supplies or black flats, it doesn't matter. It's just being sure you can access them and enjoy them and they're not a burden to you. And at that point, super, enjoy the collection and let's find the best way to display it. And I love that you have so many options for that display.
Yeah, for sure. And that's I mean, the beauty of what we do as a custom, cabinet company basically is we design the space to fit someone's needs. They don't have to make the item fit the space. We can make the space fit the items. I was working with a client yesterday in a closet space, and she really liked the idea of, instead of having wider shelves where things could get a little discombobulated, she wanted everything to have a cubby and a section and a space. So we created the shelves in a way. She gets a section to stack a sweater or a pair of jeans, and they're all going to stay in their compartment. And she's going to get to do hers, and her husband's is then kind of forced to stay in the cubby and not get kind of off.
Boundaries.
Yes, yes, yeah.
Oh, I love it.
For sure. Well, Keli, it's been a pleasure to talk today more about collections. When we were chatting earlier this week and we came up with this idea, I thought it sounded fun because I think, like you said, we all have collection of something, whether it's thoughts or ideas. I love that piece, or physical things, but we all gather and collect some things over time. So it's important to honor those if we want to keep those as part of our home.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was great to visit, Tia.
Yes, we will be back next month. And if anybody watching has a subject that you'd like Keli and I to talk about, send us a note and we'll make sure to include that in an upcoming one of our upcoming meetings.
Yeah, we love to talk, so bring it on.
Yes, have a great month, and we'll be back next month for another edition of Designed for Organization. We'll see you then.